So we've been having a one-on-one interview with Tin. It's been enlightening if you've followed us right from the start as well. Before we continue with this part, do well to click like, subscribe to the podcast, share with your friends, and let them follow us for much more in-depth conversations. In this final part, we will just want to go a bit much more personal and uncover your personal experiences and sort of explore what you believe in to be some of your most iconic speeches as well on your journey to debate. So, the first question here is, what did you sacrifice to uplift your circuit? Because there are a lot of people who tend to say they sacrificed a lot of things. I mean, in this conversation, you've already said that because of the love you have for the country, for where you come from, and for the environment around there, you've opted not to leave. Uh, Amongst those decisions, what are some of the most significant sacrifices you'd say you've made just to bring up the circuit within Croatia in terms of debating?
Okay, I think first of all, it's just a lot of time invested into the circuit. It's
Yeah.
doing coaching sessions weekly. It's giving people personal feedback. It's programming people at tournaments. It's taking your time to craft a training curriculum to not improvise things. It's taking your time to be involved in the society writ large, not just coaching. It's also doing registrations for majors, helping with fundraising, seeing fundraising tournaments. So there's a lot of time invested into it. I would say secondly, there's a lot of mental toll involved. First of all, because you feel personal responsibility if things go wrong, or if people are unsatisfied with training, or if people don't achieve the results they want to achieve, or if just the society isn't running as well as you would like to, you feel as if the responsibility is on your shoulders. But I think it's also, and this is where I can connect it back to the some of the early comments I made about football and how I take inspiration from football coaches. There's a lot of man management involved. Like after trials, if people are unhappy with their partner, and then they all dump their disappointment on you, or if you have to give pep talks before round 9 to different people with different, how to say, mental approaches to the game. You have to adapt to people who are very competitive or people who are not that competitive. It's also about people having personal things that they bring up to you because you're their coach, but also because you're their friend. And you have to just keep in mind so many different people's feelings and emotions and mental states at one time, but you kind of neglect your own in certain instances. So I think there's also that. But ultimately, it's not a sacrifice in the negative sense of the word. Because I do choose to stay here of my own will. And I do think it all pays off when I see my community grow and I see Zagreb continuing to be a relevant institution. But it's definitely not easy. And for anyone who wants to give back to their community, it's not all, flowers and roses and you just, coach a little bit and they go to majors and they win. There's a lot of work involved and you have to be aware of that. But it does pay off when you see the fruits of that labor.
Yeah. I mean, especially the time bit, because it's really, really difficult. And I sort of understand also because I mainly do full-time debate coaching now. I work with a debate organization where I do coaching. And I'm supposed to be making time to contribute to train the Ghana World Schools debate team as well. And sometimes trying to find the time is really, really difficult, especially with different time zones where I am. And so to see people who constantly dedicate their time, dedicate their effort, their resources to the development of circuits, being somebody who wants to and sometimes is limited by a lot of factors, I really, really tend to appreciate these kinds of efforts as well. And I'll just say that, like Zagreb, Croatia, they're just lucky to have you and everyone who is involved in the team up there. And I just wish them all the best as well. But a much more personalized one is, you mentioned being in Open Final in Cape Town, and then in Zagreb there was a drop in terms in Thailand. Sorry, there was a drop in terms of the performance. Did that shock you? And how did you feel about it? Because I tend to feel that would really, really give some form of psychological downtime in terms of you feeling maybe this is the end, maybe there is no more room for me. How did you pick up yourself and just psych up yourself to go again?
Here's the thing. I actually don't perceive Thailand as a drop. Because if you take a look at that performance holistically, Luca and I broke 5th, as opposed to Lover and I breaking 12th at Cape Town. Luca and I went into the top room in round 8 with Oxford, which was Jason Shaw and Lee Chin Wei, Cambridge, Ian, Ian Wu and Trenton Sewell, and LSE, which was Arth Mishra and Abhinav Matula. We
Yeah.
won the top room from CG on a shallow motion. We were in the top room in rounds
Wow.
8 and 9. Whereas with
Yeah.
Logro, I was only in the top room in round 5. And then whenever we
Yeah.
went up, we would get a third and go back down.
And go back down. Yeah.
We went through octos, Luca and I, very easily, although it was a hard room. And then went down
Yeah.
in quarters on a up heavy, shallow econ motion after
Yeah.
an hour-long panel discussion. And this was when I realized
Oh.
that I was actually a lot better in Thailand in all of
Yeah.
the. I was also top ESL speaker in Thailand, and I was not back in Vietnam. So
Yeah.
I was better in Thailand in all of the segments except the Outrun's result,
The
which
results.
convinced
Yeah.
me that the reason why I went out is arbitrary luck and not a lack of progress. And I think
Oh.
the
Okay.
first, what you call a drop
Yeah.
actually motivated me to think that if I try again and I just have a little bit more luck,
You would win.
I can go all the way. And I think this really connects
Yeah.
back to what I said earlier about how in rounds are a better show of progress than out rounds.
Yeah. 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 This is a really fascinating way to look at it as well. Because, and like you said, maybe a lot of us from the outside will look at it and say, whoa, that was a drop. But then you evaluate it in a much more detailed way in terms of, let's look at my speaker ranking here and there. Let's look at my positioning on top here and there. How did I perform in the top room here and there, which is really, really interesting as well. And that really shows also that, I mean, Thailand, like you said, obviously now I understand why it wasn't a drop and why it was even probably a much better evaluation of where you've gotten to and giving you the motivation to move on in there. But I think we've spoken about your natural advantages and the ones that you draw on. Now let's talk about your most iconic speech. Which speech of yours? Because I personally I can't select because there are a lot of them that I've heard you give that I think are really, really iconic speeches. If you were to pick one, which is really the difficult task here for you to narrow down to one, what would you say is your most iconic speech?
My most iconic speech. That is a really hard question.
Yeah.
I think hmm, I would probably pick out. Okay, I mean, it's hard to say because I don't know what other people think is iconic. But from my
Yeah.
perspective, I would probably pick Cape Town World's quarters
Okay.
when we went through from OG. Uh, First of all, because that was our first real breakthrough. Like,
Yeah.
getting through the quarters to the semis for me with this mental barrier of you're very good and you're really very good.
Yeah.
Because we took out Harvard, who was one of the favorites to win, but also because, at least in its modern shape and form, this is where I first ran the state power principle
Oh. Okay.
and then continue developing it from there.
Yeah.
So I think those would be the reasons why I would pick that speech. But I think there are many other that I'm fond of, some of which are not recorded.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick one, I would pick that one.
Okay. So now let's go to specific competitions. So there are, I think, 5 competitions here. We'll go through each of them and then let's look at your most iconic speeches. So first one is Korea WDC. Which of the speeches you delivered do you think is the most iconic in Korea WDC?
Member of Gov in semis, because I think it was perhaps the hardest ever situation I found myself in the debate room, which
Yeah.
is it really is a shallow motion. I don't know. This is a call out to Korea World CA team. I don't know why they set a round one motion in the semis, but fine. Hamza and Taha really matter dumped the shit out of that motion.
Yeah.
We were left with so little except to do rebuttal and this kind of quirky Confucianism extension thingy. And we actually managed to pull off an extension from an almost impossible position and
Yeah.
beat McGill and OO, who are a very, very strong team. I don't know if ultimately we won or we took second to OG, doesn't matter. But I
Yeah.
feel as if we pulled off a closing from an almost impossible position, which is why I
Yeah.
prefer that speech to the one in the finals or the one in the quarters.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody. So I was training. I'm training my kids for a competition in the US, and I think they were discussing iconic debaters in the world recently. Your name came up, and someone said, "Ooh, that world semifinal speech." So almost everyone looks at that speech and goes like, "That's probably the most iconic," because I personally went to watch that speech, and I think I saw you replicate a similar strategy in I've forgotten the name. There's this competition that we were in open semis, and then LSE Open. Was it LSE Open? I've forgotten the competition really. But you did a similar thing in an open semi final. We were in OG, you were in CU, I think Ateneo were in OO, and then Naomi Pandovka and my girl were in CG. And then I went back to watch the semi final motion, and then I realized there was a similar strategy pulled off. So I started studying it a lot more to see what really is it about and how can I steal bits and pieces of it to improve my game. But that was a really, really iconic performance. Like that's one of the CGs that you think about because today you see a lot of people ultimately not break once they are in CG in out rounds, and to simply do it even regardless of the motion, just break from CG at semi-finals was a really, really hard task. And to do it with such a shallow motion, obviously one of the most iconic speeches. Let's go to Cape Town WDC. Is it still the quarterfinal for you then? Because that turned out to be your most iconic when I asked you to pick all of them.
Yeah, I think it's that one. I think it's just one of the best PMs I've delivered at a major. I think it's important for me because of at least the way I deliver it. Well, as I said, it was the first iteration of the state power principle. It was
Yeah.
the debate, the one debate at majors, the first debate at majors, where I realized we can actually go all the way. We can beat the best of the best. So I very,
Yeah.
very fondly remember that debate and that speech.
Awesome. What about Athens EUDC?
Probably the ESL final prime minister, just because I feel, in terms of role execution of what a prime minister speech should be, I think of
Okay.
all my major PM speeches, it was the best in terms of role fulfillment. Maybe even better in that regard than the Cape Town one. So just think I
Okay.
delivered the closest to what I feel is a technically perfect PM.
Yeah.
Not necessarily analytically perfect, but I did everything I wanted to do in that speech. I didn't feel anything was missing. I think
Yeah.
my second place would be open semis, a member of Gov, just because that motion really ties into a lot of the stuff we've historically experienced here in the Balkans, the conflicts and the
Yeah.
wars, and being able to reference a lot of those examples made the speech emotional for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I would try and see if I would put the links of these speeches in the description when we are publishing the episode, just so that people could go watch the ones that are available online as well. Um, Thailand WDC then, which speech is your most iconic?
Unfortunately, it's not recorded. It's a round eight speech,
Yeah.
right? It's
Oh,
again, it's a CG. It's emotion. It's something on the lines of this house prefers the narrative that beauty doesn't matter as opposed to all bodies are beautiful, which I feel
oh,
is a
yeah, yeah,
weird
yeah, yeah,
notion
yeah,
because
yeah,
they're
yeah.
kind of the same thing.
Yeah,
And OG were Oxford, Jason and Shin, OO, Ian, and Trent from Cambridge, CO, Arth, and Abhinav, LSC, and we won from CG. We got a pair of 85s.
oh,
This was another one of the moments where you go into a room, you think you have no chance, you win, and you're like, oh, okay. So maybe
yeah,
maybe I'm better than just, breaking, making it into quarters and going out. Maybe the open final at Cape Town was not just pure luck. I can
yeah,
obviously win in these rooms. And I genuinely think it's another one of those cases where you pull off a CG from a very, very hard position in a motion that's really
yeah.
tough to even grasp in a way. Um, so yeah, I think I would say that speech. Unfortunately, it's not recorded.
That's awesome. It's just sad that it's not recorded, but I've seen that motion, and I also thought they were really, really similar. Quite a tough motion to debate as well. And then the final competition, HWS 2022. What's your most iconic speech from there?
I would say the final, that's unfortunately taken down from YouTube, I think.
Yeah.
So I personally have the link, but I'm not allowed to share it publicly.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I think of the in rounds, I would probably pick the Prime Minister and Cult of Productivity in round three. Although we got the
Okay.
first and a third in that round, I still
Yeah.
think that was, in terms of emotion, where there's a lot of different narratives interacting with each other, and you really have to hit the sweet spot in terms of having a nuanced characterization, which is still not self-mitigatory. I think I was
Yeah.
able to hit that sweet spot to a significant extent, so I really like that speech.
Yeah. 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 I mean, so we've gone through really iconic speeches as well. I will just basically just go watch some of them. The ones I've not watched so far, I'll go watch them. And this leads us to the final question of this discussion, which is on your beer count. I know you have a long beer count that you're on. I don't know whether you are done or whether you are still on it, but tell us about it.
Yeah. So first of all, let me actually check because I don't wanna lie to you about the actual number we're on. So let me just check
Yeah.
on my phone.
Okay.
Um, give me just like 30 seconds.
Cool.
Yeah, while I'm doing that, so the beer list. Oh, okay, I found it. Wait, just a second. Yeah. Yeah, okay, we are currently on number 243.
Ooh.
Yeah, so the beer list is something that started with Petar Schneider, who is, as I've already mentioned, he's a Zagreb debater, also very, very
Yeah.
prominent ESL finalist of worlds, EFL champion of worlds, also a very close friend of mine. And just sometime shortly before COVID, we both realized we have a sweet tooth for good beers, and we just thought it would be fun if we kept track of all the different beers we drank together. And
Yeah.
the logic is we have these like holy principles of drinking beer, which I'm not going to go through in detail. But the point is, a beer only counts for the list if we drink it together at the same time.
Ooh. Okay.
And the point is to drink as many different types of beer that we can, from different brands,
Yeah.
within one brand, like different, like, lagers and Weiss beers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the grind never stops. We're never actually going to be done. So long as there's more beer in the world to drink, the list is going to go on. And we're currently on number 243. We've actually
Wow.
systematized it in Google Sheets. We track we track the country of origin, or we track the type of beer. Even actually, at some
Wow.
point, we're thinking of going back through the list, back to the top, and drink all of the same beers again, so we can do reviews. And one of the most fun
This
things
is
to do
interesting.
when you go to a tournament, to a different country, you just drink all the
Yeah.
beers because you wanna fulfill. I think we drank all the commercial beers in Hungary, for example.
Wow. This is interesting because I didn't know it was this detailed and this fun with the beer list. But yeah, it's really been amazing, and I'm sure it also counts for memories that you've shared with them as well. Yeah. I mean, any final words for our listeners? Because this brings us to the end of the questions that we have for you, and if there's any final things that you'd like to say.
I guess I would just say, I hope people have enjoyed listening to this, watching this.
Yeah.
I really had a fun time talking to you here. It was one of the most fun interviews / podcasts I've done, and I've done a few. I really hope that maybe some of the advice that I gave here, some of the stuff we talked about, will be useful to someone or inspiring to someone.
Yeah.
I would also invite people, if people have any questions about debating or if they want to get advice, they're always welcome to reach out to me. I can't guarantee I will always see the message because,
Yeah.
all inbox and stuff like that. But if I do actually receive your message, I will answer. And I think in general, reaching out to well-known debaters who you like is not that scary. They will either just not realize send them a message, in which case there's no comparative, or they'll actually answer. So I guess I would encourage people to message debaters that they look up to for advice and stuff like that. If there's going to be any more opportunities like this for discussions, podcasts, whatever, I'd be happy to join in. This was really fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. This has been a one-on-one interview with Tin Puljić, world champion, HWS champion, coach as well, and ultimate keeper of the beer list. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Do also subscribe and then share the podcast as well. Thanks, everyone. See you on the next one.